continuing my discussion about making comics and graphic novels. Now it's for part two. I want to talk about making the art. All right. So let me share my screen and we'll talk about that for a minute. So when it comes down to making good art, for me personally, as a comic book fan, there are certain artists that always jump out at me. One of my early loves was reading comics drawn and illustrated by Mike Zeck. I was a huge fan of Captain America, and when he crossed over and did other events like Secret Wars or he worked with Spider-Man, I loved his drawings. And so for me, the visual that I saw that he crafted was super important to the success of the story for me. So, just as an artist, I'm always drawn to the art first, then the plot and the story. As a creator, of course, I know that plot is essential, that you can't just have art without plot or character. If it's that, it's kind of just like dessert. It's beautiful, but it's not very filling. And so the stories or the comics that last the test of time, to me, are a combination of the two. They have that beautiful art, but then they also have really gripping plots and interesting characters to keep you going, right? That's the story of the Spider-Man story here on the side. The name escapes me right now, but it's like, oh, it's Craven's Last Hunt. Really dramatic. Another artist who I loved back in the day was Rob Liefeld. Aside from the fact that he's has so many different there are so many different views on him these days, but I loved what he was doing back in the day when I was a kid. I loved how he was just kind of turning it up to 11 with all the characters, just like this. So this is where art goes a little bit too far, where maybe we kind of forget anatomy, but the dramatic, throwing it out there, doing it all, over the top art was something I loved. So here's some tips for crafting your art for your comic or your graphic novel. Remember, comics are picture books. So yes, the plot and story and character are essential, but the visual comes first. That's what catches our attention. Second tip is show, don't tell. That's an essential element when talking about how to create comics. Show, don't tell. So here's an example of comics back from the 60s, right? This is a classic Kirby Stanley version of the X-Men. When comics were just kind of coming together, superhero comics were being rebirthed in the 60s. But it was so text heavy, right? The visuals were still there. You could see them, but it wasn't about the visuals so much as it was the story and the plot. But in this case, definitely way too much text and dialogue. This is what tell looks like. It's kind of like exposition. Sometimes you'll be watching a movie and you'll be having a good time. This just happened in the latest Mission Impossible. You're looking at these amazing visuals and crazy stunts, and then all of a sudden, whoa, the movie slows down and they have to sit there and explain what the heck is going on. Exposition. Too much. This is show, right? Death of Superman. This is all that element put into that picture. You don't need to have a word on the page, and the drama. The characters are, Superman is toast. Lois is uh crying out. Jimmy's in the background taking a picture, doing his job. Obviously, this is show. Next question is, when you're crafting the art, then is what to show and when to show it. So here's a couple ways to look at it. Um, when you're plotting out the visuals of your story, you can go moment to moment, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, and non sequitur. And these are borrowed from How to Make Comics by, geez, apologize, just forgot his name. Um, in any case, moment to moment. All right. This is kind of like a storyboard where you're just moving each each moment to moment. You're not necessarily linking things together like animation, where it's every single moment to moment, but it's like significant steps, significant keyframes you're showing for each part of the story. Next would be action to action, where it's like, event to event, where the story is moving from those things. Subject to subject is kind of like back and forth talking. Scene to scene might be just one image grabbing the story at that time and then moving to the next one. And then non sequitur is a little more complicated to explain, but it's essentially where you have one visual going on and then some disconnected text going on over here, or one image next to another, or the juxtaposition of those two things creates something more than what they are. When you're getting into actually the art itself, you should really follow good design principles, thinking about camera angles, size, scale, placement, the character pose. Look at the drama of this Jim Lee Batman and Robin picture. So much is explained in this image, just this single image. The strong, stern Batman up in the sky, the lightning crackle in the back with all the bats, and then the poor, sad Dick Grayson clutching what's left of his family legacy, and the poster of the flying Graysons flying off and the fluttering around him, where it's, in the story, it's after the death of the Graysons, and here this orphan boy doesn't know what to do, but over him looms this grand figure, Batman, who's going to rescue him and train him, right? All captured in that image. Beautiful design. Here's an example of creating that, um, action to action, kind of that beat to beat moment where what you choose to show creates tension. And this comes from that dramatic story where the Joker, you know, is about to shoot um, Batgirl, right? Barbara Gordon comes to the door, opens the door. What do you see? Focus on the gun, her eyes, right? So this drama and tension is more interesting and more significant in carrying the story on than, showing him shoot her and the bullet blast going through her body, right? This is that tension, it's that buildup. And sometimes creating tension like this is more significant than drawing the action. So you have to choose and choose wisely what part you're going to show and what things you're going to leave to the imagination, because that it can be even more dramatic. Next, as a part of your expression, you got to figure out how do you express sound effects, right? The story in visual form in comics relies on sound effects. And so you have to illustrate sounds that you can't hear. And so there's a lot of fun that can be had creating those sound effects and embedding them into the page. And so this just takes practice, and it takes a lot of research actually to look for these words and to figure out how to spell them, these onomatopoeias. It's not that easy. And so I've always got tabs and windows open on my computer looking for random spellings and thinking of ways to express a sound effect. Now get into composing your pages. And so what you want to do is figure out what you want to achieve on each page. And generally speaking, you can fit 5 or 6 story panels per page. But then you have to decide, am I doing them in, uniform form, kind of that single panel, or am I making it a little bit more dramatic by, having one inset, one small, one large, and like recomposing the page, playing around with reading order and so on. But the only way to figure that out is to doodle and sketch that first. Once you know how the story goes, then you can start sketching each page and seeing how it comes together. Here's an example of using that grid like from The Watchmen, where it was just a very 9 panel grid throughout the entire book. And inside the grid is where the interesting angles happen. You don't even realize that it's happening, but that's how it was done. Each panel was done equal sized, and then later it was arranged to develop the storytelling. Or, in the 90s, we got the splash page where artists like Liefeld and Lee, used the entire 2 page spread to put together their action shot. And then everything else had to be fit around it. And so to me, there's kind of an in between. I like doing a little bit of both. I like having panels so that it's clear how you control the story beats. And then dramatic splash pages are really pretty and awesome when really making that dramatic entrance. And I think alternating the two is good for storytelling. So in the next part of my video series, I'm going to talk about pulling it all together. All right, so see you next time.